So you have an interview coming up. What can you expect from that interview? Hey, I'm Abby and welcome back to the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. Today I want to talk to you about exactly that. What can you expect from practically every interview? So I've got 3 different stages of the interview that I'd like to talk you through. But before we jump into that, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're looking forward to learning about those different stages. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life, work, balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. So there are 3 relatively consistent stages of every interview. So I'm going to talk you through each of those stages, and stick around till the very end of this video because I've got a bonus tip that will help you make a great lasting impression after each interview. So what can you expect from practically every interview? This is a relatively standardized process, and you'll likely have a very similar experience for every interview that you participate in. The very first stage of most interviews is the opening stage. This is where introductions are made. Not only will the interviewers introduce themselves, it might just be one person, it might be a panel of people introducing themselves, briefly giving an overview of their role, why they might be in the room with you, and then they'll also ask you to introduce yourself. Chances are this will be done with that very common interview question, tell us about yourself, or tell me about yourself. This question is tricky to answer, and I've got several videos with tips on how you can successfully and effectively introduce yourself. So I've linked to those in the description box below. If you haven't already, check them out next. In addition to the introductions that might occur during this opening stage of the interview, the interviewers might go over the role and maybe even some of the logistics. So they might explain some of the essential functions of the role, why the role is open, what they're hoping to achieve with the role, etc. This overview of the position may or may not happen. It tends to happen a little bit earlier in the interview process, and if it doesn't happen, then you can also clarify this at the very end of the interview in the 3rd step, which I'll get to soon. So step 1 is the opening stage of the interview. Once the opening is complete, you move into the actual body of the interview. So this is what comes to mind when you think of an interview. It's the back and forth, asking of questions and answering of questions. Now, during this interview stage, you can expect several types of questions to be asked. You may have very technical questions that are asked, where you have to engage in certain problem solving or explain policies or procedures that you've engaged in the past in a step-by-step formalized way. However, you will most likely encounter more behavioral-based or situation-based interview questions. These are the most common types of questions asked during the interview phase, and they can also really trip you up. Behavioral or situational based questions can be answered with a very simple, straightforward formula, either the STAR or the CAR formula. My preference is the CAR formula, and I've got, again, several videos on this topic of how to answer these types of questions. If you are looking for a little bit more customized help on how to answer interview questions and specific questions for a position that you're applying to, consider reaching out to me to schedule an interview strategy session. This is a one-on-one session where you and I will work together to go over common interview questions as well as questions that could come up during your specific interview, and also strategize your answers and responses to those different types of questions. If you're interested in that interview strategy session, I have limited spots available on a weekly basis, so please reach out to me as soon as possible. I've linked to my website and my email in the description box below. The 3rd and final portion of an interview is the closing. So the closing portion of the interview will occur after the back and forth with the interview questions. And what can you expect from the closing portion? Well, you can expect that they will likely ask you if you have any questions for them. Now, if you've watched any of my most popular videos, you'll know that you should absolutely not say, no, I don't have any questions. Even if this is your 2nd or 3rd time interviewing for this position, even if this is an internal position and you know the people on the interview panel and you feel like you know the organizational culture backwards and forwards, you do not say, no, I don't have any questions. You should have, at minimum, 3 questions prepared for the end of your interview. You may even have additional questions that came up for you during the actual interview portion of this interview. So have questions prepared and ready to go for the end or closing of the interview. You'll also want to make sure that as a part of this closing stage, you learn about the next steps and the logistics you can expect moving forward. Now, this may be offered by the interviewers where they say, okay, well, next steps, you can expect X, Y, and Z. And if they forget or if they don't share that information with you, that can be one of the questions you ask at the end. Can you share with me what the next steps are of this interview process? When can I expect to hear from you next? Questions like that are perfectly acceptable and reasonable to ask during the closing stage of an interview. So those are the three main stages of any interview. You've got the opening stage, the actual interview stage, and then the closing stage. Now, my bonus tip that I hinted to at the very beginning of this video of how you can continue to leave a really positive, lasting impression on the interviewers is to send a follow-up thank you email or handwritten note. I have several videos on this topic as well, but essentially, if you want to leave that positive, lasting impression with the interviewers, even if you know them, you'll want to send a follow-up email or a follow-up handwritten note thanking them for their time, for the opportunity to interview, and this will then give them kind of those lasting warm fuzzies, and people tend to remember what happens first and last. And so by leaving them with that positive impression at the very end of an interview, by giving them that thank you, that will be a positive impression that they will have of you moving forward in the process. So my bonus tip is to write a thank you, whether it's a thank you email or a handwritten note that you send to them snail mail or you put on their desk. And that will not only help them remember you, but have that positive impression of you moving forward. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas, throw them in the comments box below. I'd love to get your feedback on what you think about this process, if these 3 steps have been relatively similar for every interview you've been a part of, and I love receiving comments, so I try to get back to you each individually, but if I'm unable to, know that your comments of your experience, your thoughts, your ideas will likely help someone else who's going through a process similar. So if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas, throw them in the comments box below and help someone else out. If you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can continue to receive life, work, balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.